really want to start a thing. This a bird gang nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling on Philly the podcast. And we can call him Man Dog or watch Miles score off the handoff. Rest of the division, your man saw Jackson like Sean, hunting like Randolph. Season here, really trying to do him in. Your boy Philly Fresco. Thanks for tuning in. What is going on, you guys? It's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, and it is Philly the podcast. And today we obviously have a very special guest, man. We have Eagles beat reporter for New Jersey, Advanced Ad Media. I can't talk today. I'm sorry. Mike Kaye. Mike, how's it going, man?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. It's a pleasure to have you on, man. So we'll get right into it. The Eagles obviously have a day off, but the news never rests. So I appreciate you coming on here and taking that time. But let's just start it off, man. I know that the 17-game season is obviously different for players, right? But it's different for reporters as well. I've had some reporters on here, and a question I like to ask is, how have you prepared for the change in this season and just changing overall football these past 2 years with COVID and now an extra game? Is there any change to your habits in the offseason?
Well, it's funny. As I was, I've been here for 3 years now, and before that I was covering the Jaguars. But when I got here, my wife was 6 months pregnant. So now we have a 2.5-year-old. And so going through the motions with him has kind of been all the prep, right? Having a toddler is training camp in itself every day. But, it's waking up early and then it's going to sleep late. And the sun makes you forget what continent you're on half the time. I just got a text message from Sirius XM to do their show tomorrow. And I said, hey, do you mind just sending me a text message like at 2:00 if I'm going to be on at 4? Because frankly, I don't know what day it is anymore. It's about hydrating. I always tell all the young reporters to hydrate. I think last year kind of exposed those who couldn't adapt, right? It was a situation where if you were lazy and you didn't seek out a story outside of a press conference, you were going to write what everybody else wrote. And so I think those of us who took the extra time to write bigger features or report, more in-depth stories or breaking news, etc., were the people that stood out. It was difficult for everybody, but I think those who were proactive really took advantage of the extra time of not driving to the facility and so forth.
Definitely. And you've already made a name for yourself in Philadelphia. A lot of people love you, which I will say is very hard for media people out here. Like, a lot of my subscribers usually just bash media people, but they love you already, love what you do. So, keep it up. But now let's get into a little bit of Eagles news. As you said, it's been a whirlwind, a lot of things going on. But our wide receiver room has been looking pretty good. They've been making some plays. I want to ask you about Aaron Moorhead. Obviously, his second year out here. Very rare that you can say that for our wide receiver coaches. How important do you think him returning has been for this young wide receiving core?
Well, over the past 6 years, the Eagles have had more wide receivers coaches than Daniel Craig has had James Bond films. So it's one of those things where sometimes, going with the norm is okay. I mean, you look at the defensive line room that's been able to succeed with 4 defensive line coaches, in 4 years. So at wide receiver, it's been difficult. Look, the last regime didn't really develop anybody. I mean, you can talk about Travis Fulgham, who had success under Aaron Moorhead, Jalen Reagor, who has, a life bond with Aaron Moorhead, has known him since he was a kid. And a lot of people talk about Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts. It's the same way with Moorhead and Reagor. So that's helpful. I think Devontae Smith is going to respect and benefit from somebody who played in the league. And I think Moorhead's in that spot. You also, it's not all on Moorhead. Kevin Patullo has been a wide receivers coach and a passing game coordinator. Nick Sirianni's obviously been a wide receivers coach. Jason Michael, who's the tight ends coach, was also a former offensive coordinator. So you're getting a bunch of really good voices in at one position. And I think that'll help develop the position significantly.
Definitely. And like you said, you were in Jacksonville, in Duval. I used to live in Jacksonville for like 6 years. I love it out there. So you're no stranger to young players, and competitive training camps and young coaches. I want to ask you, kind of basing it off of your career doing it, is there anything that stands out to you about this training camp that, maybe is different, maybe a little unique to what this coaching staff brings?
Yeah, this is the most attentive coaching staff that I've ever covered. So I covered Gus Bradley, his final year and a half, the first year and a half of Doug Marrone in Jacksonville, then the last 3 seasons of Doug Peterson. So, and now I'm covering obviously Nick. Coaches, position coaches, Sirianni, everybody, they're coaching between every single rep. I've never seen anything like it. They don't waste any time during drills and periods. In between, there are some like kind of lulls, but they're coaching moments. So it's not really an actual lull. You know what I mean? So they also do something that I've never seen before, which is after they break practice, they let the veterans kind of go and then select veterans and rookies stay for a developmental period. That could be a 7-on-7 drill. That could be individual drills. That could be an install. That could be whatever. But they're doing their best to not only nurture the young talent, they're also holding the veterans accountable. I mean, I think a lot of people talk about accountability and competition. So far, Nick Sirianni and Jonathan Gannon have practiced what they preached.
Definitely. And you brought up Nick Sirianni. Nick Sirianni was asked about his practices being a little bit on the shorter end. I know it's still early in the season, but how do you feel about it? Do you feel like they're getting in enough work in these practices, or do you think this is going to probably start to rev up over these next couple of weeks?
Well, it's like you said, there's a lot that's been left uncovered, right? So we don't know if they're going to rev up. Look, these practices have been a lot more physical than most shell and short practices I've ever seen. And that's saying something. So would you rather take more risks in a shorter practice or take less risks in a longer practice? To me, I'd want the former as well. Look, they've been able to escape some major injuries. I know Devontae Smith's going to be week to week. Brandon Brooks is day to day. Isaac Seumalo is week to week. But realistically, nothing that's going to impact the season, at least beyond week 1. So I think when you look at what they're doing, they're trying to preserve the talent here. This strength and conditioning and medical staff group doesn't have a terrific reputation or history. So with that in mind, prepping for some potential pitfalls makes a lot of sense, especially from a conditioning and health standpoint.
Definitely. And you bring up the medical staff, who I think everybody in Philly can agree with you is a worry. But, we talk about players like Davion Taylor. We talk about Jacoby Stevens. These are young players that I feel like we're standing out in camp a little bit. Obviously got a little bit banged up. Do you think that's going to hold back their development majorly? Or do you think that maybe, with this coaching staff, like you said, how hands-on they are, they'll be able to get these guys up to speed a little bit quicker?
Well, I think when you're in the room with them, they coach nonstop. If you talk to players behind the scenes, Nick Sirianni will stop a meeting just to answer a question for 20 minutes. Like these guys are very deliberate. They're very direct. And I think from an educational standpoint, that's where they're coming at it. Does it mean they're going to be successful on the field? Does it mean they'll develop the talent? Who knows? But from an educational standpoint, this coaching staff is doing everything possible to make sure guys know what they're doing on the field. And when they're not, they're going to be criticized. When they do well, they're going to be celebrated. I think they've done a really good job of setting the tone for how this entire thing's going to run. I've been impressed by Nick Sirianni. Look, I get feedback all the time. I had a journalist colleague text me yesterday, a guy I really respect. He read the transcript for the Eagles, the Sirianni presser the other day, and he's like, I'm not impressed at all by this. And I'm like, I don't know really what you're looking for. I mean, of the people that I've covered, look, Gus Bradley said a lot of wonderful things. He's one of those guys that you meet, there's 5 to 10 people you meet in your life that change your perspective on life. That was Gus Bradley. He was not a successful head coach. Doug Marrone was a guy who had some success, who I really respected. I grew up a Syracuse fan, so it was an honor to cover him. That said, when things fell apart, he lost the locker room almost immediately. Doug Peterson, same way, a guy who was a very good people manager. I wouldn't say he developed anybody. And frankly, I think he was exposed the last 2 years of his coaching tenure. So, look, everybody has their faults. Everybody has their quirks. But I think Sirianni has done the best that he could at being genuine. And I'd rather cover somebody who's genuine. I think fans would rather root for somebody who's genuine over somebody who's, full of it.
Definitely. Yeah, I love Nick Sirianni. I think people are we're bored. We make too much of these press conferences. I feel sometimes if the man can coach, the man can coach. Something you brought up that I wanted to talk about, which is really cool to me, is how you said the veterans are kind of taking these guys to the side. I was talking to someone earlier about how Zach Ertz was kind of taking Tyree Jackson to the side at one of the practices. I want to say it was Friday. I could be wrong. But I want to ask about Zach Ertz. What do you see from him? Like, just as him at camp. I know a lot of people are making a big deal about the trade rumors, about the hair, whatever you want to make of it. Has he been fully there? Does he seem like he's fully there at camp mentally?
Well, Zach's a professional. Zach's one of the most professional players I've ever covered. I mean, he's a guy who is a team guy. Just because he has an issue doesn't mean he's going to take it out on his teammates. There's a reason why the guy is so well respected within the locker room, within the league. He's a good dude, just naturally. That's what he is. There are guys that a lot of, journalists often say we praise athletes too much because you never know, right? Because you see stuff that happens and you're like, wow, I never saw that happening. Zach Ertz is a good dude. And I think he's going to do right by his teammates, do right by his friends. In that locker room. He's been engaged. I wouldn't say he looks particularly thrilled to be there, but the guy's been disrespected by the team. He's been disrespected by fans. He's been disrespected by the media to an extent. He's been disrespected by fellow players in the league. And he wants to get his. And I think an angry Zach Ertz is a deadly Zach Ertz. He's looked great in camp. He looks physically as good as I've seen him. He looks faster, and he's running angry. So, I think it's one of those things where if this doesn't work out and he doesn't get exactly what he wants, he's still not going to create issues for the Eagles. And I think that's why the Eagles feel so good about having him in the locker room. It's not a situation where, he's holding in, so to speak.
Yeah, I want to say it was you that tweeted it out and said that he had some play where he got a couple yards of yak, and I was like, oh yeah, Zach's this is the Zach we need. Zach's upset. I like this, but no, that's awesome. I really do think Zach Ertz probably has the biggest chip on his shoulder on this roster this year, like you said. Just even the fans are getting tired of him, which I don't understand. But just a little segue to these guys. I know Howie and Jeffrey have been making their appearances. Of course, they should. How hands-on have they been? I know a lot of fans have been a little bit worried about, Jeffrey Lurie getting a little bit too involved in this and that. How involved have the front office been at these practices?
I mean, they've been there. I mean, Lurie's been there for the past 3 practices, not wearing Eagles gear, which I truly respect. That's being an authoritative figure. Howie's talked to players. I saw him talk after practice with Dallas Goedert for like a 20-minute stretch, which was interesting. This last practice yesterday, we're doing this. Today's Friday. Like I said, I forget what day it is. So I guess Thursday.
Friday, yeah. Today's
Friday. So Thursday. He spoke for a really long time with Rodney McLeod after practice one day, he's working really hard on a side field to get ready for week 1. He said that he wants to prove everybody wrong, that he'll be back by week 1. We'll see. He remains on pup, but not really that involved. They're letting Nick Sirianni do their thing. Listen, there's something that I want to say about that, right? So talking heads, radio people, national TV people keep projecting this Nick Sirianni's a yes man. Well, the other day, in front of the owner and in front of the GM, he ripped into Jalen Reagor, one of their first-round picks. Both the owner and the GM wanted Reagor pretty bad. It's one of those things where, he's not going to not be him. And I think Sirianni is a guy who's shown some of that fire that Doug Peterson really didn't, to be honest. And I think the whole yes man narrative is laughable at best. And if you do any research on Sirianni, you can tell he's a guy he's polite. He's a good guy, but he's not going to get walked over either. So it'll be interesting to see how this kind of goes around, because Peterson kind of had an opposite personality where he was willing to just adapt to what was going on around him. Sirianni's somebody who, like Jalen Hurts, wants to be that coffee bean and affect the environment around him.
I like that. Yeah, definitely. I think that Sirianni's definitely getting slept on. Now, another guy I want to talk about in this coaching staff, we've had Jacoby Stevens and we had Ryan Kerrigan on here, and they were literally just, gleaming about their coach at linebacker, Nick Rallis. He's very young. What have you seen out of him? Like his coaching style, has he stood out at all at camp with his coaching?
Yeah, he's 27. He's the youngest position coach in the league, and he's been out there doing drills with the linebackers. Alex Singleton, I spoke with a couple of weeks ago, and he was like, yeah, what's cool about it is he's out there, he's my age, he's doing the drills. So we're learning by seeing as well as being learned by, coaching. So, excuse me. I think what's interesting about him is he can relate to the players, because I was talking to TJ Edwards and I was like, look, Nick was ending his college career right as you were beginning yours in the same conference. Like, what's that like? And he's like, I actually think it helps because you're relating to a guy who was once your peer and has had to earn his stripes to get to where he is. Look, Nick Rallis is got a good reputation amongst the league, coming from Mike Zimmer tree, never hurts. And look, Jonathan Gannon's got a reputation of being the defensive Sean McVay. So I think those two guys are in position to really make some noise. The linebackers look a lot more in sync this year is what I'll say.
Definitely. And now, one thing I do want to ask about, obviously, there's been a lot made of us getting this cornerback, Steven Nelson. What are your thoughts? I've had, Spadero was kind of on the fence. He was like, it is what it is. I've talked to, Chris McPherson. He was like, I love the guy. Where do you stand on the Steven Nelson pickup?
Well, I think that he allows you to really manage the depth chart. So here's the thing. Darius Slay's your number one corner. If he goes down, it's cool that Zach McPherson's making all these plays, but realistically, you're down to Craig James and Zach McPherson if Darius Slay goes down. Here you have Darius Slay, Steven Nelson, and if Darius Slay goes down, you have Zach McPherson. It's a different, you know what I mean? Like,
definitely.
It's a different dynamic. I think this corner group is actually much better than what we projected. I really like what I'm seeing from Josiah Scott in the nickel job behind Avonte Maddox. I think you're going to go 6 deep. I think it'll be Darius Slay, Avonte Maddox, and Steve Nelson starting games. Zach McPherson will be a key contributor on special teams and the number one backup outside corner. Josiah Scott will be the backup nickel corner, and then Craig James will be that kind of utility guy who's also a special teams captain. So I think this group is rounded out pretty well with the addition of Steven Nelson. Now, he's had an up and down camp, kind of what you'd expect from the fact that he wasn't here in the offseason program. He's learning a new defense. He's not as well conditioned as probably the other guys who were here for the offseason program. But he's had some good battles. I think there's been a lot more negative towards him than positive so far, just because I think reporters tend to write about the catches as opposed to the pass breakups or like the overthrows because of good coverage. But he's been fine. I mean, I think he's an upgrade over somebody like Jalen Mills or Avonte Maddox on the outside.
Definitely. Now, we've had a lot of upgrades this offseason, I feel like, especially to this defense. You could have done anything for this defense, and it would have been an upgrade. But who do you think, maybe rookie or, free agent signing that we had, is there anybody that's standing out to you at this camp so far?
I mean, that's new.
Yeah, that's new.
Yeah, I think Eric Wilson's had a good impact on the other players. I think he knows what he's doing. He's got an eye for the ball. He just forced a fumble on Miles Sanders on Thursday during team drills. He's a guy that I think is going to be better than a lot of people expected. I think he's really taking on the leadership role pretty well. He's working after practice every day with Jordan Mailata, kind of showing him, at least it seems like, second dimension blocking, you know what I mean? Or second level blocking, right? So obviously he knows how to block a pass rusher or an offensive lineman, but on a screen, you've got to be able to block downfield and smush a linebacker. And I think Wilson's giving him perspective on that.
Definitely. And now I got two more questions for you, and then I'll let you go. But I wanted to know, looking back, we're 1 week in, we're like a week away from, preseason games. how confident should Eagles fans be in the work that these Eagles have been putting in? Do you think that it's been successful to this point?
Yeah, I think the defense is going to be something that you should be very excited about. This defense has a lot of depth. They're upgraded at several spots, in my opinion. If one guy goes down, they've got another who can play at a relatively comparable level. Offensively, there's been struggles, but I do think the running back room looks really, really good. It's very deep. I think the tight end room looks really, really good. The offensive line, even if Brooks or Samali were to miss a game, I really like what I'm seeing from Nate Herbig. I also think Luke Juriga's had a pretty good camp. So is Suo Opeta. That's going to be a really interesting battle for that 9th or 10th spot. And then, look, even at tackle, I think they're doing pretty well. If Andre Dillard's your backup left tackle, as much as people don't want that outcome, it's a pretty good left tackle position to have.
Definitely. Yeah. And now the last question I want to ask, I have to ask it. Obviously, everybody's talking about it. With the whole quarterback situation, how solidified do you feel? I don't want to ask, a headline or anything like that, but how solidified do you feel the Eagles are moving forward with Jalen Hurts? I think that's a fair way of putting it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair way of putting it. I actually thought when you were talking about everybody's talking about it, I thought you were talking about Ben Simmons. But
I didn't want to take that shot. You see what I did there?
Oh, nice. Well played. Look, I know they are interested in Deshaun Watson. I also know that the Texans don't want to trade him right now. To echo what Jay Glazer said, they are not in a rush. The Texans kind of know what's up. They don't want to be lowballed. They also know there's so much clouding this thing that, if a trade were to happen, there'd be so many conditions that need to be applied that, I wrote this on Twitter yesterday, but like, if you're trading an asset like Deshaun Watson at his lowest value, right, you've got to think to yourself, well, you're going to get 2022 and 2023 draft picks for him. Well, that's not going to change at the trade deadline. It's not going to change in March. So if you let the legal process play out and there's a positive, well, then maybe you'll get more compensation. Obviously, the downside is there could be, legal ramifications. It could get worse. But frankly, if you're not willing to take a loss right now, you're not going to be willing to take a loss later. So I think they're going to wait this thing out. I'm not going to speculate on Watson's extremely serious allegations, especially with these 22 civil suits and 10 criminal complaints. But I think here's what I'll say. I think the locker room has bought into Jalen Hurts. It's on the front office and head coach to meet them there. I asked Nick Sirianni yesterday during our press conference, what's your look? We've watched Jalen Hurts be the first team quarterback throughout camp. If that's not going to change, what's your hesitation here? And he said, well, we're not there yet. There's no need to rush. And he's correct. They don't need to. But with Deshaun Watson sitting out there, it's always going to be a question. And it's always going to be something that your quarterback has to think about. And they constantly talk about distractions. Well, there's no bigger distractions than your home, your whole family or your friends texting you after a meeting. Hey, here's the rumor on this. And believe me, that happens to players. So I just think, for the sake of the Eagles, if there's not something that happens by like preseason game number 2, they need to come out and say, listen, this is what's what. My impression of Nick Sirianni is that he doesn't want to lie. I mean, obviously he doesn't have 1,000% say in this. So he doesn't want to lie to a group of men that he's trying to gain trust with. And then, oh, wow, then they do this, right? So, Jalen Hurts has the locker room. You don't necessarily want to, pat him on the back in front of everybody. And then a week later, there's a whole nother situation there. So I think Sirianni has to play this the right way, whether that's to the fans' liking, whether that's to the media's logic. That's a whole nother point. But right now, I would say there's an 80% chance that Jalen Hurts will be taking snaps under center in week 1. Well, no, actually, I'd go up 85 just because we don't know if Deshaun Watson would miss time if the Eagles were to trade for him. So I feel very confident that Jalen Hurts will be here. Does that mean he'll be here at the trade deadline? Does that mean that stuff could happen next year. Who knows? But it's hard to, prognosticate what's going to go on with Watson and what the Eagles are inevitably going to do. Clearly, they don't want to take the risk right now. If they were willing to jump, if they were feeling froggy, they would have jumped already. And so the Texans are kind of in this boat where they've got to stand still because, let's say Watson gets cleared of all this in 2 weeks, his value goes exponentially up. What for right or wrong, right? So I think that's kind of where the Eagles are at. That's where the Texans are at.
Definitely. So it's Hurt season for now. It's Hurt season with an asterisk, basically.
And listen, I don't think they would be completely disappointed if that's the outcome. Like, I think a lot of people are projecting this just because you have an interest in an upgrade. The Eagles have interest in every upgrade. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to jump at that upgrade, right? So, there are some moral obligations that you need to look into. There's a lot of research and vetting. I had former Dolphins and Saints GM Randy Mueller tell me the other day that it'd be career suicide to trade for anyone with these sort of lawsuits. You're innocent until proven guilty, but there's nothing that's been able to be proven guilty or not guilty at this point. And so you're taking a massive risk. And so, there's also the question of Deshaun Watson's no trade clause. Does he want to be here? Because all we've heard about is Miami, and frankly, Carolina would be a very nice destination for him based on his Clemson background. It's also in the NFC where the Texans wouldn't have to see him very often. Matt Rule's a very big players coach. So it's one of those things where there's so many factors that need to be figured out that it's hard to predict anything. So like when, your question was completely fair. But until this trade happens, Jalen Hurts is the guy.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that's where everybody needs to just be. I think that's the perfect pocket to live in right there. He's our guy until proven otherwise. But Mike, I appreciate you so much for your time, man. This was a lot of fun. This is your second home, so you're more than welcome anytime you'd like to come back on, man. And thank you so much for the great work you've been doing. Like I said, you're becoming a lot of people's favorite reporter. So keep it up, man.
I appreciate that. Thanks for having me.
Definitely, man. And thank you, everybody, for watching. Be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe. We are on the road to 3K. But other than that, y'all know what it is, man. It is Fly Eagles Fly, and we are out here. Peace.